Amazing. Thank you so much all for coming. We really appreciate it, especially on a Thursday at the end of the day. We decided that we'd take a lot more of a chill approach to this talk, and we really want you guys to participate as well. So if at any stage you want to shout out and ask a question, then honestly, please do. I'm Eloise Singer. I am the founder and CEO of Singer Studios. And I've just made a VR game called The Pirate Queen with Lucy Liu, alongside my amazing friend and colleague here.
Hello, I'm Dave. So I run another studio, Dream Reality Interactive, but I've known Eloise since 2018, and I've been the executive producer on this game from inception through to release. And I would say, I didn't realise I was doing this. I would have worn long trousers if I'd known.
I literally just roped Dave into doing this about 2 hours ago. So, amazing. Okay, great. So we are here to talk about the art of cinematic storytelling in games. And we're going to give a little bit more of a background to kind of justify why we're the ones who are speaking. So I come predominantly from the film industry, sort of through and through. I think the first film I ever worked on, I was 15. I worked on a film called Gambit with Colin Firth and Cameron Diaz. That as soon as I walked on a film set, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. That's so cool and so different. And ever since I went to university, and I also worked in a production company at Leeds when I was there at the same time. And then when I left university, I worked at a studio called Pinewood Studios, which is based in Slough. It's where they make Star Wars and they make James Bond. And I worked on a bunch of different productions when I was there, from really big films like The Nutcracker and the Four Realms, which was like a massive Disney film where they had a craft store on the side where you used to get free sweets every day. It was great. To things like The Crown and The Great British Bake Off. So it was sort of an array of different productions. And then after that, I went and worked at a company called Lionsgate, where I sort of specialized in distribution and also development, so looking at how stories are created. And then about 7 years ago, I set up my own company, and we have produced a number of multi-award-winning films and now games. So we made a film called Rare Beasts with Billy Piper and Lily James that went out on Sky, and we also made a film called The Last Rifleman for Universal that was featuring Pierce Brosnan. And we're also making a 3-part documentary series at the moment. So my bread and butter has very much been in the film world, and I met Dave a couple of years ago, and we started talking about how there's a really interesting cross-section on what we could do together to kind of break new ground in games and storytelling by using some of the tools that I had in film and Dave's extensive knowledge of games.
So I've been in the games industry since before the last millennium, is the truth. And for quite a long time, I was at Sony's London studio. We did a lot of different games, some of them more party games, some more narrative, and then set up a company, Dream Reality, about 8 years ago. As I said, I met Eloise 2018, and we started talking and got very excited because like the idea of bringing some of the really strong storytelling from film, but also the talent and just the way of storytelling, and then bringing that to games is really interesting and appealing to me. And I've done quite a bit of VR work as well in London studio and since, so that absolute immersion you get with VR and the storytelling was really interesting, like the opportunity to get that together. There's still not that many people have had the chance to do that, I don't think. It's still sort of breaking new ground. So, and then through, Eloise got a grant, I think, was it Creative England, early on. So we got a small amount of money, and we used a bit of a network of game developers really to help us get Vertical Slice, and that went out to some film festivals, and we got some really good feedback. And then like helping Louise get this story and doing that thing you do in games where you make this amazing, massive thing, and then you cut it down. But going through that whole process to get like really the essence of what the story is, but also to understand what mechanics would work when you're telling a story. So it's, what the game itself is not, you're going to replay it every week, you're trying to get the best score. It's not that kind of game. It's an experience. It's an immersive story. It's about going through that. So what mechanics work for that don't get in the way of the story, but help the story. And I think we ended up spending quite a lot of time going through that. And just like practical things of how many mechanics can you work on in a game with that size budget, because you can't do too many because you end up doing loads of not very good mechanics. So you've got to bring that down and sort of, you know, how can you reuse mechanics, things like that. So lots of crossover between the two, and that's what's made it a really exciting project.
100%. Cool. So this is what we're going to talk about, and Dave has started to touch upon the first bit of our talk, which is we're going to use the Pirate Queen and Lucy, which is a VR game that we've just developed, as kind of the case study for how you can take cinematic storytelling from films and what things tips and tricks that you might consider adopting when you're designing and creating your own games. So we're going to give you a cinematic story structure that you guys can use for when you're starting to work through your game, and we'll give examples of what we did on the Pirate Queen and what worked and what didn't work. And then we're also going to show you some ideas of how you can craft complex characters in a game, which again, it's a formula. So we're literally just going to give you the formula. And then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for creating like dialogue that actors will thank you for, which are things that I've definitely learned from being in film and from directing actors, and kind of like a shorthand of how you can just create really cool, punchy dialogue that I think will just help you guys out if you're crafting narratives. And then finally, we're going to sprinkle a little bit of movie magic and just show you a couple of techniques that you can use to kind of deepen your storytelling in games. It's going to be really light touch. There's like a whole talk that you can do just on that point. So it's literally just going to be like a bird's eye view. But if you have any questions afterwards, then please do ask. Cool. So the Pirate Queen, Dave.
So, well, we began, as I said, by sort of meeting and talking about the idea of taking one of the stories that Eloise's company was developing. And this is actually an interesting point. You know, we use these different words in the different industries. So like developing a script means one thing in the film industry, developing a game means something completely different. You know, developing a script doesn't involve Unity or Unreal, right? So sometimes you get these like, oh, hang on, no, I meant it in this way. Anyway, but one of the things that I guess actually comes probably from TV and things like that, but I'm also involved in a company called Interior Night, who made a game, As Dusk Falls, really great narrative game. And Caroline uses a writer's room. And so that's something we thought, actually, yeah, great. I haven't been in Caroline's writer's room, I'm involved more on the sort of commercial side. However, we knew that was a great technique. So we started that with the Pirate Queen, got a few people who were involved in the project from writers, but also, I mean, I'm not a writer, but I can help, I think, because I can understand mechanics and what mechanics might suit the writing and things like that. So, you know, putting together some of these things to then build out a pipeline as to how we went from just an idea, really, or basically, was it a film or TV? I can't remember. Script.
It's film. Yeah.
Film scripts, and then how we took that, got essence of a vertical slice, which became like a festival piece. That was quite interesting as well. Like just taking a game to festivals. You know, it's not something that it does, but it sort of hasn't fitted in my world of making games, really. So that was very unique, but really worked well. And then taking that and then building out, and then how do we take that piece and turn it into a full, you know, GDD game, other characters, how we're going to represent those characters, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly as Dave says. And with our writer's room, it was a really interesting process, and it's something that I highly recommend if you are crafting a narrative game to consider it, because I never even thought that you could do a writer's room for a game. And speaking to Caroline, who works at Interior Night, she was like, oh, we've just done it for us. And the approach is very similar to what a traditional writer's room is in film and TV, which is a bunch of writers get together, they come up with ideas, they see what works, they write a script. In games, what we did, as Dave says, is we brought together our narrative designer, our game designer, myself, the creative director, one of our producers, and our lead artist, and we all sat down together and we were like, okay, and this is where it was very interesting. Instead of starting with mechanics, let's start with the story and then develop the mechanics to support the story. So it was a very much a different approach, and I think that really enhanced the depth of the narrative that we created. And then on top of that, we realized very early on, and this was led by our amazing writer Maya Bodestein, who's half Chinese and half German, that she really wanted to ensure that the story itself was as historically accurate as we could possibly get it. And so we put in a huge amount of historical research and time into developing this narrative. And we brought on sensitivity checkers, we worked with academics, and we basically designed this narrative that, for example, when we first designed the ships, and our art team designed the ships of these Chinese junks, we sent it to our researchers to check, and they came back and they were like, well, actually, we didn't use nails in China at that time to create ships. We actually used dovetail joints. So then our artists had to go and remove every single nail from all of the wooden planks to create ships that were accurate to the time. And I think that that's a beautiful example of how you can use research and historical accuracy to really enhance your story. And so we're going to show a quick clip of a behind the scenes of the Pirate Queen. Hopefully the sound will work.
Let's see how well you fare as the Pirate Queen.
The Pirate Queen is a true story based on a woman who started as a courtesan in the mid-Qing dynasty. So it's the 1800s, the early 1800s, 1807, right? About that time, who married a pirate. And then after his unfortunate demise, she took over and became the leader of this pirate fleet and was the brains behind standing up for women's rights.
She went on to command a fleet of about 70,000 people during the lead up to the Opium Wars and became the most powerful pirate of all time. But there's this misconception that everyone thinks that Blackbeard was the most powerful pirate, but it's not.
And it's a woman.
And it's a woman.
Surprise.
Yeah.
At that time, it was very common for women in China to have their feet bound. And it was thought of something as that was beautiful and cultured. So here's this woman who doesn't have her feet bound, and she rises to this leadership.
And it's the most extraordinary story of an underdog, if you think about it, because she literally came from poverty, from a life of working as a flower boat girl, to becoming the most powerful pirate of all time.
The fact that it's a true story and it's been created in this virtual world of technology is quite significant. It's bringing the old and the new together, and also presenting something that's not just a game, but something that's real and exciting and historic.
That was beautiful.
Almost there. But why is this ship full of such rotten planks? A bitter earthen scent. A good pole tea. I see. Each one of these represents one of the flavors. What is happening? Those Western devils. Quickly, we must get back to the ship.
One of my favorite things is the hand gestures, like true acting right there from the recording. Okay, great. So we're going to break down a cinematic story structure for you guys to take away and adopt for the games that you're developing. The first thing to consider when you're building out your structure is world building. And it sounds very simple, and it kind of is, to be honest with you. It's literally, where is it going to be set? What time frame is it going to be set in? And then kind of building into the mood of what you want to create. And the fun thing about mood is that you can change the mood for different levels. So you can have one part of your story that might be really dark and really scary, and then you could have another part which is actually really light. So you're in a cave at one point, and then you might be in a hot air balloon or somewhere at the other, and you could have two very different feels. So I think one of the biggest learnings that I had from Pirate Queen was that the more diverse your environments, the more visually appealing it is for your players, and that's really exciting. So if you can create environments that are super diverse, that have different colors, that have different feelings, then you're giving the players all of these senses. And on top of that, I think the best thing about taking this structure, which is very traditional to film, and adopting it into games, is then you can build out what your art style is going to be. And every game that you guys are making has a completely different art style, and that's so bespoke. So for example, with Pirate Queen, as you saw in the last clip, we created these cutscenes that were designed from 19th century Chinese drawings. And we hand drawed these beautiful cutscenes that then became quite an important part of how we told the story. And you can do exactly the same based on the world and the time and the place that you're creating with your games as well. So the next point is goals.
Goals. Yes. So, sorry. Yes. And what I was going to say about the cutscenes is, from a production perspective, doing them on these beautiful scrolls looks amazing and is a lot cheaper than having all the characters and doing full cutscenes. So that was something that happened there. So yeah, we sort of, getting back to the characters' goals. So it was really important, part of the writer's room and then beyond, to really understand at the very beginning what are each character's goals, in particular the character you're playing, which is your goal is to become the head of this pirate fleet. And then you've got an opponent, their goal is to stop you. Really clear. And again, you know, you kind of get that in the first 10 minutes of a movie quite often, but that's the thing that's carrying you through. And actually, you know, I know from all the game dev stuff that we do, quite often we kind of forget that, or we get it wrong, or we overload the goals because you've got several sub goals and so on. But in this, you know, our ambition was really to make it a very accessible game. It's not a shooter where you get better and better and better and, you know, you can get an amazing high score or whatever. It's really about, for us, it was about getting a VR game narrative that anybody who could pick up that headset could play and really enjoy. Not just, oh, I get it, but really enjoy, because the idea for us is the mechanics don't get in the way of the game, don't get in the way of the character's goals. I think that's probably the main thing when we talk about the character's goals.
Totally. And as Dave says, to have a clear physical goal is the key. Like literally try not to get lost in the weeds with it. Just have a clear physical goal, have a clear obstacle, which in our case was an opponent, which is Gorpodai, who was the rival who wanted to stop you. Obstacles could literally be hurdles. They could be swinging sandbags, and you can build in your mechanics to actually be obstacles. And that again will raise the stakes. So with Pirate Queen, one of the iterations that we did is when we first designed the game, there weren't actually that many stakes, and so you didn't feel invested. And so we designed more and more mechanics to actually up the stakes and make physical obstacles that you had to overcome.
We started without a fail state.
Yeah.
Because we thought, oh, we do want to be like a movie, you know. And actually, if you saw Caroline's talk at the beginning of today, they don't, in As Dusk Falls, they don't have a game over. And it's a big deal in the multiplayer games that she's making and so on. But for this, actually, we felt that we needed those stakes. This is a different kind of game to that. This is not about choice-based narrative. This is about immersing yourself in a story and feeling the story rather than reading it or just seeing it. And so we actually felt for the sort of single-player journey through this that we built in the fail state, and it really worked then. So we built in these obstacles to your one clear goal, which is to get through all the levels and become the head of this pirate fleet.
Yeah. Perfect. And very similarly with a ticking clock, always try and include a ticking clock in your game. And that will, again, increase the tension. And that could be per level if you wanted it to be, and try and create it across the story that you're creating in your game as well. So for us, our ticking clock was you had to become leader by dawn. And that was when the Pirate Council was going to meet. And on the night of Chengxi and when she actually did become the leader, it was a similar setup. So we love the fact that that was part of the historical accuracy piece, and that's what we designed. Also, having a visual ticking clock like a sun rising is really helpful, because then your player can literally see that time is running out, and again, it just amps up the stakes. And then from that, look into the character and say, what are they going to lose? In this instance, Chengxi was probably going to lose her security. She was going to lose her position, and she was ultimately could have lost her life. And so building up what the character is going to lose is emotionally just building up those stakes. And finally, and this is where we're going to beautifully segue, hopefully, into creating a complex character, is find out what your flaw in the character is going to be. And this could be anything, and try and make it something that you feel people could relate to. So for us, Chengxi, she wanted to be the leader, but it came from a place of selfishness. She wanted the power. And so for us, we created this flaw because creating perfect characters is very, very boring in storytelling. So creating flawed characters is far more interesting, because then they go on a journey and they learn, and then you as an audience member and a player learn too. So we created Chengxi to be selfish, and that then goes into this literally very simple formula of creating a complex character, which is the want versus the need. So what does the character want, which is to achieve their goal? And what does the character need, which is to overcome their flaw, which in this instance is overcoming this selfishness. sounds like very wishy-washy, but you can very easily put this into mechanics. So we then worked out from our writer's room that we can adopt this and put it into mechanics, which is basically we designed this code of laws, which again was based in history, where Cheng Shi wrote this code of laws where everyone was supposed to be treated equally on her ship, and she wanted everyone to be treated equally, whether they were men, whether they were women, and everyone was going to be on equal terms. And so we broke up the code of laws and hid it around the ship, and part of the objective of the player is to find the code of laws, put it together, and present it at the end of the game, so that they then realize that they need to be selfless rather than selfish and put others before themselves, which is also quite a nice message to players. And the final thing that I want to add is there's like a little bit of secret sauce from the film industry that I highly recommend you guys considering when you're thinking about your story, which is, I'm sure everyone in this room has watched a film and that character on screen, they've somehow related to it in a way that they can't explain, right? Like there's one of the movies that's your favorite movie, you've seen it, and you've watched the character and you're like, I feel seen by this character. I feel like all of the parts of this character is something that I feel inside as well. And there's a secret to how you can do that, which is actually very simple, and it's one word, which is vulnerability. So making your characters vulnerable in some capacity allows audiences to really emotionally connect with them. And if you find out what that vulnerability is and you design that vulnerability, that's how you can get your players to really connect with your characters. And I highly recommend when you're developing your story just to think about vulnerability. And the shortcut to finding the vulnerability is one very simple question, which is, what is their biggest fear? If you work out what your character's biggest fear is, that is a shortcut to vulnerability. It could be that they're hiding a massive secret that they don't want anyone to know. It could be that they're afraid of failure. It could be that they're afraid of letting someone down. Whatever it is, that vulnerability is going to be the driving force to emotional connection with your audiences and with your players. And when you have it also, when you work with actors, gives them like so much to work with, because they then understand the vulnerability and they can perform in a way that's really nuanced and really interesting. So I'm going to play one more clip where you can hear a little bit of the vulnerability coming out. It's a very short clip because I'm conscious about time.
I must take both. Divination blocks are always thrown in pairs.
Good. Now throw them into the tray.
And what does she say?
My jaw will not speak until you tell her the truth.
The truth?
It's kind of strong. So yeah, that's an example of vulnerability. You can see that the main character is hiding something. They're hiding the secret, and that's going to be exposed. So we're going to quickly run through some secrets to writing good dialogue. These are shortcuts into just like how, if you have a script and you're feeling like your dialogue isn't quite working, what you can do to kind of like fast track fixing some dialogue bits and pieces. I'm also going to rope in Dave to be the actor. I haven't told him that he's doing this.
I definitely would have worn one.
So it's okay. You don't need to do any motion. We're just going to do dialogue. It's all good. It's going to be fine. So the first is subtext. When you're going through your script and you're writing dialogue, always think about subtext. Subtext is actually quite easy in some capacities. I always think of subtext as basically you're just not telling the truth in your lines, and there's always a hidden meaning to what you're saying. In other words, your characters are kind of lying. Subtext, the easiest shortcut to actually thinking about subtext is questions. So for example, if I say to you, Dave, when was the last time you saw your mum?
Do you want me to answer it? 3 weeks ago.
Okay, cool. So there, Dave has no subtext whatsoever, right? It's literally a direct answer, which in a movie or a game would be really boring. Where if Dave replied and he said, well, I guess maybe it was probably a couple of weeks ago, there's a bit more subtext, right? Because you can kind of tell that he feels a bit guilty that he hasn't seen his mum. Interesting subtext.
I have seen him. I just want to...
So when you're starting to craft dialogue, always think about the subtext. Write a line and think, actually, what is the character really saying here? Because if you're saying exactly what the character's thinking, there's no subtext and it's incredibly boring. If you're creating subtext, you want to create something that's basically kind of like a half-truth. We very rarely answer questions directly, and we usually dodge and duck and weave. So try that when you're writing your dialogue. And with that, if you feel like your dialogue isn't working, try and flip some of the dialogue to be questions and answers. That's like a really quick, easy cheat of how you can kind of just like build tension and pace. The next one is exposition. So exposition is basically where you just get like a chunk of information thrown at a player or a viewer. So I think everyone could probably think of examples of like really bad exposition. One, which contentious, but Mission Impossible, the beginning of every Mission Impossible film is literally them like giving the brief to Tom Cruise, being like, this is your mission. Do you accept? They have actually done a really good job at trying to cheat exposition or avoid exposition, which is telling it through effectively a screen. But any way that you can try and avoid exposition is, say you have a newspaper and they're finding information through a newspaper rather than a direct static conversation, or it could be through a news reporter, or it could be any sort of visual aid that will just cheat exposition. The other one that I use quite a lot is interrupting. So if you have lots of people or a couple of people interrupting each other, that's a really good shortcut to avoiding exposition, which we'll show you in a second. Another quick fix for dialogue is using not phrases. So again, if your dialogue feels really static, say there's a piece of dialogue where I say, I'm going to walk over here. Quite hard to perform that, quite hard to make that interesting. Whereas if I say, I don't think I should go over there, it's a lot more interesting. And then there's a lot more going on. It's like, why? Where should you go instead? So that's quite a quick fix as well. And the penultimate is intentions. You're going to help me out with this as well. When you write dialogue, always think about what the intention is for that character. And you can do a pass on this. So you'll do frequent dialogue passes and you can break this down. So an intention is basically what, when a director works with an actor, they're going to just give them a cue and be like, oh, try this as pensive, try this as angry. So every time you write a piece of dialogue, try and think about what the intention is, because when an actor and a director get in a room, that's literally what they're going to be doing. So if you're doing it when you're writing it, you're making their lives a lot easier. So for example, Dave, we're going to use the word what, literally what. So try saying what in an angry fashion.
What?
There you go. Try saying what surprised.
What?
Try saying what sad.
What?
There you go. 3 completely different whats. Well done.
Missed opportunity.
I know. Who needs Lucy? I mean, so think about your intentions, because it's so important for when you're working with actors as well. And the last thing about dialogue is test it out. So read it out loud, step number 1. Then test it with a friend. If you know some friends who are actors, test it with them as well. You'll be surprised at, I'll be honest, how terrible your first pass of dialogue is when you work with someone. And you'll be like, right, okay, I need to rewrite this. And then the next one is playtesting. Playtesting is huge, and it will massively help you develop your dialogue. And then just rewrite, constantly rewrite. So those are a couple of secrets on how you can try and fix dialogue. And this is just a quick example of a couple of ways that we avoided exposition.
Sister, over here.
Sister, what news?
The maze is swarming.
With Gokpodai's men.
Yes, they say he will be crowned leader.
Let them think that. Now tell me, how can I get back to the Palmfat?
That ladder to your left, it will lead you back. But sister, take caution. It would prove wise to stick to the shadows.
Thank you, sister.
Cool. There you go. Amazing. So we're going to briefly talk about the importance of casting and how it can massively change the game.
Well, to be fair, Eloise did all the casting of Lucy Liu, and it really has lifted not just the game, like the actual experience of the game, but also everything around it. So, I mean, we've worked with Meta on this game, and having the conversations with Meta we've got a Hollywood A-lister in the game, just changes everything. Actually, what I've learned as a sort of indie developer is, I think a takeaway might not be to go and get a Hollywood A-lister, etc. But realistically, if we're working on something, we perhaps can get a conversation with somebody who's quite well known, somebody who's rising, or somebody even who isn't rising, who's perhaps done a lot of work 20 years ago. And we can get, if we're pitching a game, for example, we can get somebody attached without actually having to pay for it yet. So you might do a deal that's within the budget if you get the right publishing deal, but you've got the slide, you've got had the conversations with them and so on. And I think that's something that can actually lift a lot of the game, not just at many different stages. So that pitching to publisher stage, showing it to the press, showing it to the public at the first time, people playing the game and just loving it because there's a really great actor, great voice, somebody that they've already related to in other experiences. So I would highly recommend like exploring that. You know, I was talking to an indie dev here who his game's got some influence from one of the old Monty Python films, and my advice was like, well, fine, maybe one of the old Pythons would do something. You know, there was literally a news report this week from Eric Idle saying, I'm not getting any royalties, I've got to work. It was like, get on the phone to him, find his agent, get on the phone, maybe he'll do something, you know, and actually changes that publisher conversation from, I've got this indie game to, I've got this indie game and I've got one of the Monty Python, you know, and actually that might change quite a lot of the prospects of the game. So, you know, there are many different facets to the casting. It's not just how great the voice or the acting will be, it's everything else it can do around the project.
Totally. And then,
and can I still don't know how she got Lucy Lou. So I got an email. So we've got Lucy. What? How did you do that? I think you should talk about it a bit. How did you do
it? Honestly, like very simply, we literally just reached out to her agent and we said, we're making this project. Would you like to be involved? And they said, could you send us more information? It sounds really interesting. So we sent more information and they said, this sounds really interesting. Could you send us more information? So we sent them more information. And then they came back and they were like, this does sound really interesting. So yeah, we'd like to proceed and move forward. And that was kind of the beginning of it. I think I do make it sound very simple. To be fully honest, having come from the film world, I think as Dave touched on when we first started the talk, there's a very different dialogue in film to there is games. So even just the word development in film means a completely different thing to what it does in games. And I think when you're speaking to casting agents, etc., and you've come from film, you do have a shorthand of kind of how to pitch it to them. It's very similar to when you're pitching a game. It's totally different. And it was a huge learning curve for me pitching a game having come from the film world, because it's completely different in film. So I think
it's worth saying as well that like Eloise's company, part of the mission is to find undiscovered, amazing historical figures, women, and bringing them to the fore. And I think as well as being a great thing for the game and a great thing, it also that helped get the talent, because it wasn't just a sort of a commercial arrangement. It's like actually we're trying to do something interesting, something that's got relevance to the world now. And so if you have got like these deeper missions within your business and so on, then actually aligning those with talent can help. And I also think right now we've got quite a good opportunity next 2-3 years, because we've had the Last of Us, Fallout, etc. The actors are very interested in games and entertainment, whereas 10 years ago it was like, oh, I feel a bit embarrassed about that. You know, right?
Yeah,
we've got.
It's true. We do. Thank you. But it's true. I think definitely, like Hollywood is changing their outlook on games, and they're starting to get really excited by games. So take advantage of it 100%. And I'm really proud that Pirate Queen is one of the games that is being advocated, and we have won a bunch of awards for it, and people are really excited about that. And I think it's a testament to how incredible games are, and the importance of games, and how storytelling in games is so nuanced and so interesting. So I guess the final piece of advice is the devil is in the detail. When you think about telling your story, don't just think about your script, don't just think about the dialogue, think about the environment that your world is. Think about different rooms. So for example, with the Pirate Queen, when we first designed her cabin, we thought, okay, would she have made her bed? Would it be clean? Would it be really messy? What type of objects would be in here? We added some of her children's toys so that you as a player can go in and pick up different toys and get more of her story. So just think about the environmental storytelling, and that goes with sound design as well. You know, is there going to be a storm outside? Is it going to be really loud and noisy? Is it going to be really quiet? It goes the same with music as well. You know, we in Pirate Queen recorded all of our soundscape with very traditional drums that we found in Hong Kong that were based and designed in the 19th century. And that was something that was really important to us because we really wanted to sort of build that foundation of our soundscape. So think about all of those different elements and how that can kind of enhance your story. That is basically it. The last point was, I'm just conscious about time, but the last point is we came up with loads of obstacles, obviously, as every game does. And one really interesting one was that when we first designed the game, there weren't female hands in VR that you could just get off the shelf. So we had to design our own, I know, classic. We had to design our own hands. And as a result, it actually is kind of like one of the best bits about the game, because we designed these beautiful female hands that's actually based on the hands of one of my best friends. And they have signature rings that we designed very bespoke to Cheng-Shi and her life. We designed scars, we put mud under her fingernails. And as a result, they're so detailed and beautiful, and they tell so much about her character. So there's always going to be obstacles when you start a game, as we all know, but try and turn them into creative opportunities, because it will just enhance how you tell your story. Amazing. And as Dave says, as a studio, we are developing our next game, Trailblazer, which is the story of a woman who stole her husband's invention and went on the world's first road trip. And it's pretty badass. So yeah, we're all keen on female narratives.
I think we should touch on this because this has also been out to the film festivals.
Yeah.
So certainly in VR, there's opportunities to put, you know, game/narrative into these festivals, and that's been a real eye opener for me as a game developer, to like, okay, we're just going to build a little bit of the game, you know, put it out there when there's not necessarily a publishing contract in place and things like that, which traditionally for us as game devs, we've not done that as much. And using those to elevate the concept and the presence has really helped in then securing funding and getting deals in place to actually make the full games.
Yeah, totally. It's a really good point. Okay. We're open for questions. Yeah?
Oh, and there's a mic coming.
Oh. First of all, the mic is not working.
Good.
There we go. First of all, congratulations on the project. It looks fantastic. My question is, when it comes to environmental storytelling, when it comes to the role of a narrative designer/writer specifically, how involved is it for them to be? Such that do they just say, oh, the room is disheveled, or do they say, oh, that kettle is lopsided, and just get involved with the individual visual assets in the room and say, oh, the mattress is turned over or whatever?
Yeah.
How much detail is it the writer's job to describe the environment, and how much is it the technical art instead?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's totally subject to what you feel is important. For Maya, who is our lead narrative designer, she wrote sort of a broad outline of the feel of each room, what each room would look like. And if there were key elements that she wanted, then she would put that in the story. And then from that, we also kind of broke down from each environment's maybe 10 hero props that were going to add an extra level of detail and personality to each environment that she then broke down. And then from that, we had a breakout with our lead artist, Will. And so it was myself, Will, and Maya. And we all sat down and created the concept art for each room. And then that would be another opportunity for both myself and Maya to weigh in and say, actually, you know, Cheng-Shi's character, maybe it would be like this, or maybe it should be like this instead. So I think, like all parts of game development, it's iteration, and probably start with the things that you think are the most important in that space, and then work with the rest of your team to kind of flesh that out.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Oh, there's another question there.
Just behind you.
Hi there. I was just wondering, in terms of working with actors, do you envisage a point where games might end up in a sort of workshop scenario in the same way that might happen in theater, film, and TV, in games. I mean, as the actor in games, sometimes this happens if you're doing performance capture. As Dusk Falls, for example, there was a lot of consultation around performance and rehearsal and that sort of thing, which is, you know, quite unique actually. But if it is just the voice actor in the voice booth, you know, you come in at the 11th hour, very much at the end of the process.
Yeah.
And as an actor, it's something I really miss, working in games versus those opportunities that you have in other media to collaborate and to maybe say, oh, I don't understand this moment, or maybe we can make this clearer. How can I understand this better? We don't have the luxury of those conversations in games at the moment. And I was just wondering if there's an awareness of that, or an intention towards that sort of collaboration with the performers.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's something that I noticed as well, coming from film into games, is that the recording for games, because everyone's so tight on budget, you have to get through it so quickly, which is why when you're developing your script, always think about your intentions, because honestly, it will just fast track to everything and people will thank you because it saves a lot of money. But at the same time, you do lose that craft of workshopping together. I think it was interesting with the Pirate Queen specifically, we had 2 recording sessions with Lucy. So we had the first, which was just before we premiered the game at Tribeca Film Festival. And I hadn't met Lucy before. So it was, as you say, we walked into the room, we sat down, we started working, and we kind of found the character as we were going through that process. And then after that, when we went back to basically designing the rest of the game, because for Tribeca it was just a proportion of the game. So for the next bit, which was designing the rest of the game, it was really useful because I'd already had that session with Lucy, so I knew the character and I could hear her voice in my head as we were iterating and rewriting dialogue, which was effectively, the first session was our workshopping session, and we used all of the dialogue from that session. And then the second was the big recording session. So I think maybe that approach is also quite interesting, of having kind of like a preliminary recording session that you still use because time is money in this industry, but also having the majority of your dialogue much later that you can properly record, so that you have the voices and the characters really in your head, and the performers also know those characters really well.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll just to add to that, there's a project that I'm working on at the moment, which has got a narrator, and we haven't done this yet, but we're thinking about, can we find talent that's like a comedian who can not write the whole thing, but like tighten up the dialogue in it in their own voice.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a way for games within our budget constraints to get a bit more of that. So if you get somebody who's got some writing skill to at least help with part of the dialogue of it.
Yeah, and also there's a beauty in that collaboration with actors as well, of when you feel, they read a line and they think, actually, what if we just tweak it so that it works like this? And the performance is incredible. And you're like, oh my God, yes, that's great.
Yeah, I think for the actor too, it's a very enriching, nourishing, and creative thing to be able to work in that way.
Exactly. And it is about collaboration at the end of the day. It's working with any of your team members that always is. So I think with actors, a lot of the time allowing them to lead and facilitating that is actually the best approach. But directing actors is like, again, it's a whole other talk in itself. I had a slide in this for directing actors, and then I knew that we would never have time to get through all of it. So literally time's up.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming and listening.
Thank you very much.